Today's stream is primarily going to be based around the Northwest Cup experience from a couple weeks ago that I had, and recent trip to Virginia for personal reasons. But we played a chip tournament at one of the local membership-only clubs. They were having an open house and a chip tournament, so we decided to play that. Before that, though, we will talk about my experience in the Northwest Cup. For anybody that doesn't know, the Northwest Cup is an invitation-only Fargo Cap 5-person team event with 2 teams, one from Oregon, one from Washington, once a year in November typically. Kind of happens right before the Mosconi Cup. It's a Mosconi Cup style event, and it's run kind of like a big production. Limited Lights. I think Raw Hanna does the commentary. This year, Allison Fisher was there doing commentary and did a clinic. There's a bunch of spectators. You have to pay for entry and admission. So it's kind of a big deal if you're just like a regular person. Certainly the biggest event that I've ever played as far as the individual spotlight goes, with only 10 players and everyone that's watching is be part of that. Is watching that, so when you're hitting the ball, everyone that's watching it is watching you, and you're not the only one there. It's not like a regular tournament where there might be several matches going on at once. This is a featured table. This is the only table, so different kind of pressure than I've normally felt in other events. I've definitely played top players on live stream before, and maybe that kind of paved the way towards being a little bit more.
It's doing that thing where it's like looping and then going back. No, it's good now, I think it's just the way that the thing was looking at it. I think it's fine. Sorry.
I don't know if we had a technical issue there. Sorry. Where was I? Talking about the pressure, and I don't know. To me, it was actually, I went into it. You get invited, and months before the event, so you have plenty of time to do your due diligence, find out what the format is, go to the venue and play if you choose to. I knew that it was going to be in Seattle at Ox Billiards. I'd played there before, and I went there the week before the tournament and played to see what kind of cloth they were going to be on. And the table was a little bit faster than this table here as far as the speed of the cloth, and however the pockets are a little bit bigger than this table, so I felt comfortable with shot making. So initially I think what I like to do is compare the environment that I'm going to be competing in to the environment that I practice in, and know the differences, so that when I'm in the competition that I can make the proper adjustments as soon as I see them being there. One of the things that it's really difficult to experience beforehand is what the crowd is going to be like and how you're going to feel about the crowd. And that was one of the things that was difficult to understand, and I knew that going into it, that was going to be an interesting thing. How am I going to deal with the crowd? And I would say that the first match that I played was the initial match where it's like a team round robin, and I played, I don't even remember what the score was, but I ended up winning my game. My opponent was Paul Marquez. He had the break. He had a jump shot off the break and missed, and then I ran out to win the game. And at that point, I played that rack really well, I thought, and I knew that I was capable of playing at a high level once I had just done that, where even though there's all these people watching and I'm the only one participating at that moment, it's my inning, everyone's watching, the live stream's going, hundreds of people are watching on the live stream, and I'm just running the balls out. And I know that it's a serious moment, but at the same time, I've been visualizing and, thinking about how I'm going to respond and how I'm going to react and what I'm going to do. And once that moment came, then I was able to fall into that role, pretty nicely, and that was good. Then played the Scotch doubles match, and we kind of faltered a little bit, didn't play that well as far as what my true potential was. I think that at that point, it was just a little bit of nerves, and then my singles match did win on the first day, but certainly either my opponent or myself could have played better, and I took that kind of feeling a little bit off towards the end, and then realized that I just got to shake it off. I did play good at the beginning, so I knew that it was capable, and that the second day I was going to be able to come into it being even more comfortable. So I'm, trying to establish a narrative about how I'm going to be more successful going into day two. We had a 5-3 lead from day one, and it was raised to 9 points for day two, and I was set to be the fourth match. So based on the likelihood of the matchups that were known beforehand, if and when I played, because it was potential that I wouldn't have played if we would have won all the matches leading up to it, then I wouldn't have played. So we had to lose at least one match for me to play, and then we ended up playing the last match where we won, a doubles match, and I played a lot better. Came with the shots when we needed to, and did make some mistakes, but overall it was really good performance myself. And I just wanted to kind of tell people that are a little bit more interested, if you end up playing like Mosconi style tournaments or like big production tournaments or events, just kind of to expect the unexpected. As far as one of the things that actually affected me the most that I didn't notice was when in these events where the crowd is a factor and people are loud, is that when you're the only table going, once you get down to shoot, then all the noise pretty much goes away. So you're dealing with kind of like a lot of noise while you're like standing or whatever, and then as you get down in the shot, now the noise kind of goes down. Versus like if you're playing in a tournament, typically there's going to be other people shooting, and then the noise is going to be constant. So I definitely had to deal with that, where I had to accept that part of it and figure out, okay, I got to deal with that. And then another thing is there's a 30-second shot clock, so dealing with the buzzing and the beeping constantly was a trick. And then I kind of figured that out too, where the rule was that you had to get down within 30 seconds. But once you stayed down, you could stay down until you shoot your shot. As long as you didn't get back up, then you could stay down. So I ended up just kind of like waiting until the beeping was going, and then I would get into my shot. That would give myself extra time and not feel the pressure as much. And then towards the end, it was more like, as necessary. Some shots you need more time, some shots you don't. There was one extension available for each game, so I was trying to be a little bit more sparingly using those, but then realization at some point you're like, well, you need to use it at that first key moment so that you can hopefully gain the upper hand and then finish the rack, versus like potentially having a subpar shot because you were feeling a little bit rushed. So that was something to deal with. The noise thing was a little bit interesting, but once I kind of realized that, then I let it go. But a little bit of that was nerves. I think that was happening the whole time, and then I only started noticing it when I was already kind of like feeling out of sorts a little bit, and then that kind of led me to that other place. But that was definitely something that I noticed that I did better about on the second day, reacting to the crowd as well, because when you're losing a game or winning the game, the crowd is involved in this event, so it's more like a public arena. And I think the first day I kind of tried to just ignore the crowd and that made it a little bit more difficult. And then the second day, I just decided to just go with it, and that extra energy that's being provided, you kind of have to burn it out. So I was trying to be more animated and just kind of like enjoy the moment more, and then just kind of have fun and like be part of the spectacle of it versus just trying to like be there and pretend that nothing is happening and that you're, you know, all by yourself, you know, because that's just not the way that it really was. So that's pretty much, you know, without going into the nuts and bolts of individual shots, just the narrative of the way that I saw that things went down. I would say that if I play another one of them, I'm not going to make too many adjustments other than that hopefully I'll be able to put a little bit more time in on the tournament table, just to get a little even more acclimated, and then other than that, maybe, you know, hit a few more balls with my teammates that I might be playing doubles with. But at the same time, you know, after most of the people that I was on the team that we played against, I'd known for many years, so it wasn't like I had to learn how they play and then adapt to that. It was more of just trying to get out there and, you know, do the best that I could, and then add as much positive energy to the team as possible, you know, and then just let everything roll off you, and then accept the current moment and do your best, you know, to help the team all the time. So, you know, moving forward, I think just more of that, you know, is good. You know, anytime you see someone that's feeling like a little bit down on themselves, you know, we had a couple of the guys didn't play as well as they wanted to, you know, which is inevitable, and I was fortunate that it wasn't me this time. So, you know, at the same time, it's like when you recognize that someone else is playing poorly, you know, getting down on themselves, you gotta kind of like shake it off, you know, don't let that whole, you know, mood permeate the team. So you gotta try to, you know, get them to realize that it's all good and that it's just the way things goes. You don't get, you know, somebody's gonna end up being the one that gets the bad rolls that are inevitable, a little bit more than your share, and someone is gonna be the recipient of a few more good rolls, you know, and that's just the way the nature of it is you don't get to pick who gets lucky and who gets unlucky. All you really get to do is just respond as best you can to that, and, you know, making your teammates that are more aware to be more aware of that when they start getting down on themselves, you know, as helpful as you can be, you know, and then you got to kind of stay out of the way. You know, pool is an individual sport, but then in a team environment, it adds a little bit of a dynamic where now you're dealing with the other personalities and you're trying to enhance their play, you know, and a lot of that comes down to just, you know, being as positive as you can, because you know that if you're have a negative mindset, you know, other people can feel that, and you don't want to have them have to combat your energy. They're dealing with their own energy as well. So the best thing you can do is just try to be as positive as you can. And I think that was what we did better, I think, than, you know, the Oregon team in this situation. We're the Washington team. But we did have the home crowd advantage, but I think we were able to lean into that and stay a little bit more positive and shake off, you know, any of the negativity that we might have been, you know, slowly accumulating. So that was good. Is anybody online?
There's 4 people watching.
Does anybody have any questions to ask? Because we're about to move on to the next topic, which is going to just be talking about the Virginia trip that I just had. And we're going to mostly talk about how the differences of playing like in a place you've never been against people you've never met before in kind of an unknown, you know, situation. And, you know, it's a lot of what I like to talk about is, you know, the unexpected things that can come up that you don't know that you're going to have to deal with, but you end up having to deal with it, and it's actually pretty common. It's just as you progress in your journey in pool, I think that, you know, at the beginning you don't really think so much about like going to Vegas or going to another state or, you know, whatever. You're like, oh, I gotta go to this other bar to play pool league that I've never been to, and that's a new experience. And then as you get better, you're like, oh, okay, now I'm like starting to be more familiar with the locals, you know, and these are the people on my team or the pool hall that I play at, you know, and then I, you know, go to the nearest other spot to check it out, see who's over there, and eventually now you're like talking about going to Vegas, going out of state, and then if you get better, then now you're dealing with, coming into a place with people knowing that because, now anybody can look you up with your name and find out how good you play relatively with the Fargo system, so it's not like you can be unknown completely. As soon as they look you up, they roughly know, your skill level. So dealing with that and just dealing with, not knowing the style of the players after kind of like being in the same area where like we're Northwest players where I know most of like the Oregon, Washington, and like, BC and some of like Calgary players will come down and play. So I know a lot of those people, but then, start traveling over to like the Midwest and the East Coast and I hardly know anybody. And it's just a different thing. So I just like to try to, give people a little bit of insight as far as that goes. Like things you have to deal with is like, you're not going to necessarily get the same food that you get normally or whatever, your room and board situation, or you might have to travel to the venue, and all these things for me are make it difficult at the beginning, but then once you've had a couple repetitions and you start getting the feel for how you have to pack your bag, and then what kind of like, you don't know if it's going to be hot or cold in the room, for instance. So I like to like go to a new place that I've never played before and wear a couple different layers and have options to switch out in case it's too cold or too warm, or maybe the temperature goes up and down because they could have like the door open, or it might be an area where the swings of temperature are great over the course of the day, and interior might be different environments, and you don't know any of that going into it, so you just kind of have to wing it. And I think that it's a good idea to do as much as you can pre-event to plan for all the different things that you know about, because then there's going to be the things that you don't know about are the things that are going to trip you up. So then you can just be like, all right, I did as much as I could to prepare myself, and now we're going to like learn about the things that I didn't prepare for that can come up, and that's basically the journey for going out of town, because the pool game itself is like relatively the same. Now there's like Brunswick, Brasson, Diamonds, Valleys, Predator tables. There's only so many different kinds of tables you're going to compete on, and they all are the same size roughly. Pocket's going to be relatively the same size. The rails are going to play a little bit different, etc. But there's only so many different kinds of cloth. And all that over time you get used to. It's like the first time you play on new cloth that you've never played on before, so you get Andy cloth, or you're playing on the Brunswick cloth or the Predator cloth instead of Simonis, which is kind of standard around here, then you're like, oh dang, this is way different. But over time you deal with all that stuff. That game doesn't change over, when you go to another place. It's more about like, okay, what am I getting into that's new, that's different? You're playing against unknown players, some of which might be as good as you and are really tough matches, but you're uncomfortable because you're in a room you've never played in before. It makes it really challenging, but that is part of the fun of it, is going and testing yourself and knowing that it's going to be an unknown thing that challenges you. Anything that you're like already prepared for is not going to necessarily grow you as a person. So that's one of the reasons to do it occasionally. I don't typically like to travel a lot for pool, but at the same time, it's always beneficial when I do, so I do a little bit at the time, planning to a little bit more maybe down the road. So that was pretty much the Virginia thing. It was just a chip tournament, and honestly, it was interesting because I was like, by far, there was only one or two other players that were within 50 Fargo points of me, or even maybe not even that many of the 20 players that played. So mostly with low-rated players, which I didn't know any of them. But the tables were Rassons, and they were pretty fast. So it played a little bit similar to the way that the Ox played, and I did pretty good just from that. It was nice, but I knew that some of the locals you know, they were as dialed in as they could be because that's their home room, you know, and it was interesting going in there, looking at on paper where some people have like 400 Fargos and they're running, you know, like one guy broke and ran a rack on me and he was 309 Fargo, and that was just interesting to see that because you don't really expect that to happen, but you know, here we are. So, you know, not letting that kind of stuff tilt you, and just kind of like playing everybody as tough as you can and not expecting them to make mistakes, you know, and like you would back home against XYZ player that you know makes those mistakes in these situations, you know. So, you know, it's a good test of your own game, your own like strategy, your own like, this is how I play against somebody that I don't know, that, you know, I have no idea what they're capable of doing, and what I need to do is do my best to win in an unknown scenario. So I have to you just shoot the most reasonable shot that you can. You don't have to go for everything. You know, you don't have to play safe all the time. You know, some of the time, you know, you gotta try to get out when you might not want to because you don't know how good the other guy plays. Maybe they play really well, you know, and if you leave them anything, then they will get there. So you have to, you know, take on that. And sometimes, you know, maybe not. You know, you don't know. So that's the thing. It's like, what are you gonna do when you don't know what's gonna happen? You know, how are you gonna respond? Like, how are you gonna like premeditatedly go in and execute your strategy against an unknown opponent? You know, is a question you gotta ask yourself when you go out of town, because that is the situation that you're gonna get into. Well, I don't know if I got anything else to talk about with that. Do you have any questions, Vic? Vic is over here off to the side. Has anybody got on there, said anything?
Nobody said anything, but there's 4 people on there.
What time is it?
10:24.
Dang, 24 minutes into it. Okay. I think, what else can we do? I could talk about upcoming events a little bit and how I'm going to prepare. I am signed up for a tournament on December 11th. It's like a 4-person tournament. And it's a winner take all. I think it's going to be single elimination. So it's long race to 9, 10 ball on a 9-footer. And I think to prepare for that, I'm just going to like, you know, work on my 10 ball break. I can't get up to play that at the venue, but I will show up there early as much as I can to kind of, you know, acclimate. It's going to be a diamond table, which is pretty standard play style, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm also signed up for a tournament in January, bar table 9-ball memorial tournament for Eric Sawyer, who recently passed. Is if you're local to Washington, Thurston County, then you'll know he's a PCA operator, league operator, but a super nice guy. So I'll be playing that memorial tournament, and that's going to be at Scratch Billiards in early January. I think it's full, but maybe you can get on the list if you're just finding out about it now. And that's just going to be a regular bar table 9-ball, and that's the place that we play bar table 9-ball at mostly. So I'll be pretty fine there. I'm going to play there at least 2 or 3 times, probably in their weekly on Tuesdays and Fridays. So that's preparation as best you can. I might try to get involved with playing some people a little bit of 10-ball just to get reps in and watch people's style. You know, like I like playing everybody, you know, even players that are lower Fargo than me. I think it's worth it to play against because you kind of you deal with things that you're not used to dealing with. You know, I think that, you know, people that don't have, you know, as much skill as I do are still definitely great to play against because they get to learn, if they're into it, to learn, you know, from what they're doing. They can watch me play, so I try to hold up my highest standard of play even when I'm playing against, you know, lower skilled opponents, because I want to not only execute, you know, my best and without having as much pressure on the opponent playing as well, I can then, you know, expand my like skill level while, you know, competing, just so that I can then, you know, test myself and my new techniques that I'm working on and shots that I'm working on without having as much pressure to make it happen right away. You know, knowing that, you know, even if I make mistakes, that, you know, my opponent will then have a couple more opportunities maybe. Yes, it's true, which will be good for them because they're also dealing with the pressure of playing against someone that doesn't give so many opportunities. And, you know, you don't know necessarily when those opportunities are going to come so much as you do when you're playing against, you know, lesser opponents that, you know, make kind of like, you know, when the shot is tough, you know, they might just go for it, and then who knows what's going to happen. And a lot of times, you know, they'll leave you a shot, you know, and then playing against a better player, it seems like kind of the standard is even if they miss, you don't really have great shots all the time because it's kind of the style that I think as you get better, you just start knowing the speed of shots to make it to where it's hard no matter what, you know, and et cetera. And
So
I think-
it's I'll be your honorary 10 hole.
who is it?
TRPT man.
I don't know if you're around. Give me a message on Facebook. But other than that, yeah, just trying to hit as many balls as we can, play tournaments to get prepared, and hoping that people start making comments on these so we
That's
have
Ray.
something else to talk about. Is it Ray? What are you
That's
doing
what he
tomorrow,
said.
Ray?
I asked him if he's got time for sets for me. He's like, yes, please.
We'll be out. Yeah, I think tomorrow we're gonna have a little bit of time. Wednesday during the day, but then probably not till after Thanksgiving holiday weekend. But we'll be back at it.
He's
Definitely.
like, playing pool, let's go.
Right, exactly. So I don't know if anybody had any comments. No.
Just right.
Word. All right. Well, I think we're just gonna end the stream then and start practicing. Get ready. I don't know. What do you want to play? Some banks.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, anybody that has anything to say, you know, throw a comment up, and then obviously future content is going to happen. You know, so if you want to be involved with that, you can help direct. This is kind of like a community thing. We do have a school group. You can it's going to be in the
Put
pin
link in
the pinned comment. You know, if you want to join that, if you've never been involved with that, that's another source of like developing over time. You know, something that we're working on. You know, growing the membership base and then getting more contributors so that we can focus the learning of that towards whatever the bulk of the people want to learn versus just what I'm going to talk about when everyone is just kind of sitting there just chilling. So I appreciate y'all. You know, hope you're having a great one and have a good holiday season if I don't see ya.